Hello, welcome to the Straight No Chaser podcast. I am your host, Bishop. Welcome back, you guys. Welcome. Today, we are going into a deep discussion about who raised you. Real talk. That's the question I want us to wrestle with today. Because for a lot of us, the answer isn't simple, right? It's not simple. Sure, we had our parents. Maybe some of us had our grandparents, maybe even some extended family, right? But the truth is, a lot of us were raised by a whole mix of people and things, right? You were raised and shaped by television, our neighborhoods, and sometimes just ourselves. Now, for me, my family shaped so much of who I am. My mother specifically, right? She was the first person I ever met, the longest person I've ever known. And she shaped my mindset in ways that I will never, ever forget, right? Never forget. And so I know I'm not the only one that has experienced this growing up being shaped by so many different things, Now, because see, I also know that not everyone has been engaged with a parent or had a family structure. Some of us had to figure it out on our own, right? And back in the day, that was normal. Seeing a young kid handle adult responsibilities, that wasn't strange at all back in the day. It was expected. That's what makes us that lost generation, right? So we're gonna go through today about the raising of us, right? And going back in time. Now, first, I'm gonna speak on my own personal experience, right? For me, I remember my mother shaping how I saw myself, right? And that I was very careful to not allow the world to shape how I saw me, right? Because she said that people around you are always going to have opinions about you. They're always going to want to try to tell you how you should live, how you should navigate. It is important for you to understand who you are, what you like, what you don't like, all of those things. And it was like, wow, I hadn't thought about it kind of in that way until, because I was a kid. But my mother made it so that how I saw myself was the most important thing out of everything. Not what other people saw, what I saw in me. And as long as I held that close and I respected and I loved that, I was going to be okay. I appreciated that out of my mom because that's something I still carry with me. That shaped me heavily. And I know for a lot of other people, they don't have that type of foundation. Not the one that I have, of not allowing other people to shape how you see you. Now, I know for many others, family, even for me, family was my first teacher, right? Family was my first teacher. Like I said, my mom, but not just my mom, my grandmama, my aunties, grandpas, cousins, all types of people in the family structure were first teachers to me. How we're talked to, how we're disciplined. It's all teaching us stuff. How we're loved or how we're not loved. That sets the stage for everything, right? See, for me, my family, like I said, was a foundation. My mom, my grandma, my grandfather, my dad, all those people gave structure. My grandmother was really good about structure. Especially when you came to her home, there were certain things you had to do. You weren't allowed to walk into a room and not speak. You had to wash your hands before you touched any food. And you always had to clean up after yourself. That's those first teachers. First teachers. But then I also knew people who didn't have family structures that even cared about raising them or teaching them anything. Those kids were raising themselves. And it could have been because mom and dad worked double shifts, or maybe they weren't present at all. And so those kids had to become little adults. They had to cook their own meals. They had to raise their siblings, help their siblings with homework. Some of them even had to pay bills. That experience shaped a lot of people for better or for worse. They learn that the only people they can depend on is themselves. They don't forget that because they grow up. Not at all. So that's one of your first teachers, right? Either having family or not having family. It's going to teach you a lot. Then you get into the media, that media becoming that surrogate parent, because you spend a lot of times back in the day, we spent a lot more time with the TV than we might have been able to spend with our parents, depending on the circumstance. The television raised half of us, okay? Think about it, Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, Cosby Show, Different Strokes, MTV, you name it. We was watching it. It was our babysitter, sometimes a friend. TV shaped a lot about how we thought the world should look. TV had us thinking that if we had a problem, we could wrap it up in 30 minutes, right? In 30 minutes, I'm going to figure out my problem, figure out a solution, implement said solution, and get the results I want all in 30 minutes. That's not reality, but TV would have you thinking that it was. TV would have you thinking that everything you ever wanted, it could always happen as long as you thought it would happen. Sometimes yes, but sometimes no. But TV a lot of times didn't always show you the no. It wanted to wrap everything up in a pretty old bow. Now here's the irony in all of it, y'all. We were learning lessons from fictional families that sometimes our real families couldn't even teach us. Because families showed us togetherness, problem solving, and sometimes the love we didn't even see every day at home. That is powerful. But it also meant we were taking in ideals that didn't always match our realities, and we didn't realize it. We were trying to live up to some false reality and wondering why we couldn't meet the goal or match this image that we had because it wasn't real. It wasn't real. Then another way for many of us growing up, how we were getting raised by the neighborhood because the block raised us too. Because neighborhoods and communities were actively involved in the raising of children at one time. The neighborhood, the people outside, they played a huge role. You couldn't learn everything from the block, but you could learn a lot from the block. You could learn how to fight, how to joke, how to survive. The candy lady, the corner store man, the older kids down the street, they all left a mark. I remember in the community, a lot of times what I learned is how to be self-sufficient. Like if I tried to learn how to do something, if older people saw you try to learn how to do something, they're standing there encouraging you and not allowing you to quit. It's how I learned how to ride a bike, the community. Yeah, I had family, but the community won't let you quit. They see you fall and they make you get back up and get on that bike. Try again, try again, try again, try again. The community won't let you fail. I love that about my community growing up. And I miss that for children now that many of them don't have access to communities like that because we did. But we also got to be real. The streets also taught us things we probably shouldn't have been learning at 9 or 10 years old. That's the truth. Cussing, hustling, adult business we ain't had no business knowing. Out here being fast asses, grown asses. But the neighborhood also shaped us into survivors. It also made us grow up too fast, though. Because there were times the community would tell you, slow down. You're trying to do too much too fast. There are times the community would call you out. And then there were those moments we did that self-raising and that exploration. Because some people had to raise themselves. Some people would go home and nobody was there. So they just figure it out. They make their own dinner. They do their own homework. There's no adult there to encourage them to do it. They just do them. Some of them had to come home and take care of themselves and their siblings. For me, I had moments where I had to step out and explore my own world, meaning when I had to go participate in activities without my mom without my brothers. That's me exploring the world on my own merit, having to figure things out for myself. And there were times I was afraid to do it. My mother would say, get on in there. You can do that. It's important for you to explore this on your own and figure out your point of view, not the point of view that I give you. Because, see, that kind of independence gives you toughness. It makes you self-sufficient. But it also robs you of the ability to just be a child, right? Because a lot of us never got that luxury. I know some of you listening have never had the luxury of being a child because you had to be a little adult way too soon. Way too soon. Now, see, there's an emotional impact to all of this. Because, see, there is a result of being raised like that, doing all the things that I said, the self-raising, being raised by your neighborhood, media, a lot of time your family, because your family being that first teacher, it makes you resilient. It makes you strong. Now, it can also leave you with blind spots because you only know what you know and you don't know what you don't. A lot of us grew up thinking, well, if I survived it, the next generation should be able to as well. But see, that mindset, that will kill empathy, though, because it makes you forget just because we did it doesn't mean it was right. It goes back to just because you had to take care of yourself at 8 years old, like you were 18, doesn't mean you should have been, doesn't mean that you should have had to do it. You just did do it. And that doesn't mean that 8-year-olds should have to do it now. That's not what it means. We wear toughness like a badge of honor, but a lot of that toughness was really just trauma disguised. That's all. It was trauma, but we tried to make it, oh, I'm just tough. Well, you actually are dealing with a lot of trauma that you haven't dealt with that trauma. You're hanging on to. Now, I want to ask you to look at the kids today. They're called soft, spoiled, lazy. People say they can't handle anything, but can we be honest about something? If we had iPads, video games, or even helicopter parents back then, we wouldn't have been outside raising ourselves either. The difference is society decided kids now should have more protection, more structure, more opportunities. And instead of celebrating that, some of us resent it. We see them enjoying childhood the way we never did, and we get bitter. But we shouldn't. We shouldn't be. We shouldn't. We should want to give the next generation what we didn't have. That's just real talk, because there's no doubt that our generation gained a lot. We gained independence, grit, resourcefulness, but that cost was extremely high because a lot of us lost our sense of play, our innocence, or even our softness. And now as adults, we're left with choices. Do we repeat the cycle and force our kids to grow up too fast, or do we break it? Do we keep saying that's just the way it was? Or do we finally admit, yeah, but that don't make it right? So when somebody asks, who raised you? The truth is, y'all, it wasn't just our parents. It was a whole village, a whole set of circumstances, and sometimes just ourselves. But the real question is, who are we raising now? Are we giving them the same survival-only upbringing we had? Or are we finally making space for kids to actually be kids? Because if we want to stop being the lost generation, we have to make sure the next one isn't lost too. Thank you all so much for listening today. I hope you appreciated this episode of the Straight No Chaser podcast. Something to get you to think, right? I love to spark thinking because it causes us to move a little different. I thank you for joining me today, and I'm going to end this podcast the way I end everything. Don't you let nobody live rent-free in your head. Don't feed the trolls. And you can accomplish anything you put your mind to as long as you stay consistent.